Purple Warriors podcast. I'm your host, Ali Sugars, and thank you for joining us. This podcast is about raising awareness for domestic and family abuse by allowing survivors to share their own journeys to recovery. You will find practical yet powerful information and tools that you can immediately implement into your own journey to recovery. You will also hear information on how you can help someone you suspect may be in a toxic relationship. To support this podcast and get access to amazing bonus content, click Become a Patron for more information. If you have a story to share, reach out to me, Ali F. Sugars, on Facebook, YouTube and Instagram. Hosts and guests will often discuss sensitive topics in detail. While this is done with the utmost respect and dignity, this may cause triggers for some listeners. Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Purple Warriors podcast. Now our guest today, I'm excited to say, is actually the very first man that we have had as a guest on the podcast, and judging by his face he didn't know that. So without any further ado, welcome Ross Murker. How are you?
Thank you, Ali. I am well.
Beautiful. And you know what, this as well as being the first man on the podcast, you were also from Washington State, so quite obviously over the opposite side of the world to me. So I just find it fascinating that we can do this together.
Yes, technology is wonderful when it's used correctly and for good purposes.
Absolutely. So today, Ross is going to share his personal story with us of resilience, and he's going to discuss existing versus living, which I'm really curious to talk about. And then you're going to talk about how you've taken these experiences and now you're helping others in their lives as well. So before we go any further, tell us a little bit about your life experiences, Ross, and why you've come on the podcast to share with our audience.
Well, several years ago, over a decade, except for my height and being blessed to be married to my angel, I was fairly average. Had a job, had a mortgage, had a house, had cars. And my wife and I wanted to start a family. She'd had kids from a prior marriage. I'd had a kid from a prior marriage. We wanted a child together. We figured, hey, we both work right. So we started trying. And after a few months of trying, which, trying is fun, but we weren't really having any results. So we we flipped a coin to see who'd go to the doctor first to get checked. And it was her. And that was when she got her first diagnosis. And I lost her about 10 and a half years ago to cancer. And I went from being an average, mostly happy guy to hanging on to the bare edge of survival.
Right. Yep.
And she had extracted a promise from me before she passed that I wouldn't follow her on purpose. And so there were times that promise was all that kept me hanging on.
I was going to say, I can imagine that would have been extremely difficult for you to not want to. I mean, as you're talking about your wife, I can feel the love that you have for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, but she knew her husband, and she knew that if I promised that I'd keep my promise. And so I went from an average kind of life to just barely existing. Underemployment, unemployment, spotty employment, eviction notices on more than one occasion. I was in a bumpy way. And a friend of mine, a mentor, said, you're not really keeping your promise if all you're doing is existing.
Right.
And I said, yeah, what do you mean? He said, did you or did you not promise her that you would live? And I had to do some real deep thought about that. And I said, you're right. And so all of the self-help and pop psych stuff that I'd read, all the NLP books and a few other odds and ends, I started applying them. I said, here's this life I've got where I'm not really working on jobs too terribly much. I have all this time. I'm not dating or anything. Why not start testing stuff? Why not start experimenting? Why not see what works? At least what works for me. And I'm one of those odd kind of people that at that point, I was needing to write stuff down and remind myself of what I was doing that worked and what I was trying. Yoda, there is no try, only do. Well, there was a whole lot of do not in that mess.
And there usually is, isn't it? And it's usually we have to kind of go through what doesn't work to find what does work.
Yeah. And there was a lot of that. There was a lot of, it doesn't work because it's not something I'm going to do. It doesn't work because it seems too complex. It doesn't work because it seems, although very simple and easy are not the same word.
Oh, very true.
It's very simple to lift a ton. You just put more than a ton of lift underneath it and wow, it's up. That doesn't make it easy. It's not something that I could do without mechanical assistance. So that difference, speaking, it was amazing to me. I learned which tiny hinges those big doors swung on.
Right. Yeah.
Little things like, I've got to go to work versus I've got work to go to.
Oh, very good.
The first one's resentful. The second one's grateful. Which way do I want to live? And the phrase came in from Stephen Batchelor's book, Buddhism Without Beliefs. He said it boils down to three things. Death is certain. The time of death is uncertain. Therefore, how do I want to live?
Gives you a choice, doesn't it?
Yeah, lots of them.
And you know what, the sentence that you said before, it was just an extremely simple shift of words, but the total meaning behind it changed.
Exactly. And I'd always been fascinated by words and language and word play and meanings and connotations, those second and third order definition parts that just, you're not always aware of them unless you're paying really close attention. And I found myself having to pay really close attention to what I was saying to myself inside my head because I needed to keep my promise.
That's incredible.
And it became where my major job was hanging on, was getting better, was healing, was growing. And then the Mary Poppins bit came around about how, a spoonful of sugar. You find the fun and poof, the job's a game.
So it's taking you a step further.
And I like games. And okay, well, let's make a game of our life. How do we keep score?
Love it.
And then I found Peterson's law.
Yes, tell us more about that.
Peterson's law says that which is measured improves or increases. That which is measured, recorded, reported, and rewarded improves or increases drastically. And I said, well, why couldn't I apply this to a planner journal system? Where, okay, I'm going to physically get out of bed. I'm going to shower. I'm going to dress in clean clothes. I'm going to feed the animals. I'm going to, just little microscopic. Here's one for everybody who's watching. Look in the dictionary at the definition of success.
Oh,
it does.
We said this before, didn't we?
We did. It doesn't mention size, magnitude, or duration. It just says the completion of an intended or purposed action. And it was that level of, because I'm not always the brightest guy, and I certainly wasn't at that point. I needed stuff that simple. I need another friend of mine coined a phrase, clue by four. And sometimes that's what it takes, clue by four, right upside the head.
Oh,
and that was one.
Good, you've got supportive friends that will do that for you.
Sometimes, yeah. So sometimes it's that face in the mirror.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So tell me, in everything you went through, all the journey that you took yourself through, so you've now found the things that obviously work well for you. And tell us maybe a little bit about how you've brought those experiences into doing what you're doing now to help others.
Well, I'm one of those people that I have to have things the way I have to have them. And I started looking at planners and journals. Mm-hmm. And I started noticing that most of them, the ones on paper anyway, only run from 6 or 7 in the morning to about 9 at night.
Yep.
Like, you don't live after those hours? You don't, outside of those hours, you just shut down and go, well, the book says time to go to bed because there's no room to write any activity. Mm-hmm. So people who work nights, which I did at one time, and people who work weekends, and it was unsatisfactory to me. Well, make one that is. So I built out a 24-hour planner journal, and I broke it out in 15-minute segments. And guess how many 15-minute segments there are in a 24-hour day?
Well, I've got to be honest that maths isn't my strong point.
I had to stop and count. I was like, 96. Okay. So is that close to 1% of a day? And I started playing with the numbers because I enjoy doing that. It's part of the game. Hey, we're keeping score. We're using numbers. What if you took one of those segments? Now back off a bit. What if all you did was record what you did throughout a week?
Right.
And noticed whether it served you or not? Mm-hmm. What if in that next week you said, I'm going to be sure that I'm in bed asleep at midnight. From midnight to midnight 15. I'm going to be asleep. That's my plan. Wake up in the morning the next day. Were you asleep from midnight to midnight 15? Yes. So you have a sleep or a Z in the plan. You have a sleep or a Z in the actual. That is 1% of your day, of your 24 hours, that you lived on purpose. A lot of people say sleep might be low-hanging fruit. Well, if you're depressed or insomniac, maybe not. And eventually you run out of the low-hanging fruit anyway. But by that time, if you have a depressive voice or something else going on, that your internal dialogue, oh, I'm a failure. I've got an illustration for that one too.
Oh, well, yep, great. Go for it.
Yeah. Imagine, if you will, 2 people changing homes, moving addresses. They both say to themselves, I'm going to unpack 5 boxes in my new home. Mm-hmm. Now, the first individual unpacks 3 of the 5 boxes. He says, I just can't do it. I just cannot finish this. I didn't unpack the 5 boxes I said I was going to unpack. I failed at what I set myself to do. That's it. I'm a failure. The second individual also plans to unpack 5 boxes, only unpacks 3. Same exact situation. He says, I didn't get all 5 done like I thought, but I did unpack 3. So I'm 60% successful with room to grow.
Beautiful. I love
Same
that one.
situation. Who's happier?
Exactly. It is literally all in the way you look at it, isn't it?
It is. And it took me putting it on paper and showing it to myself. And it's amazing how dismissive we are of the successes that we do every day. And there's no real good reason for it.
That's right. Ross, I've just thought of something. So with you've said that you recorded 15-minute increments and you've crossed them off. Why specifically 15 minutes? I'm really curious. Was it because that at the time you were finding it difficult to cope with 15 minutes at a time?
I wanted chunks I could grab onto and control.
Right.
I figured 15 minutes, 1% of a day. And this gets into other things I've read. Darren Hardy's compound effect. He suggests 1% a day. I think that's a little over eager. So I go 1% a week.
Right.
Albert Einstein is misattributed as saying something about compound interest being the greatest human invention. The fact that he said it is not a fact, but it ranks right up there. The Japanese have a concept, kaizen, incremental improvement.
Right.
And it all comes around to, okay, who defines what success is for you?
Yes.
Too many times, and I caught myself doing it, I'm trying to do something toward some plan I have, and somebody else is suggesting, dude, you really need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to be helpful because in their structure, what they're suggesting leads to happiness for them.
That's
and
right.
That's cool. Sometimes challenging to look from the outside and someone describe a situation like what I was in immediately after she passed, and then contrast with the way I'm living now, where I'm publishing my own how-to material.
Right. Yes.
And simplicity, and this, and that, and those principles, and those tiny hinges. How did you do it?
Yes. Would love to know.
And my answer to that is trial and error was a lot of it. But maintaining that observer perspective and treating my life somewhere between mad scientist, move myself around and turn myself this way and, change my life this way, that way, and the other way. And then also make it a game.
Right.
How much of what I wanted to do did I do? How well did I score today?
Mm-hmm.
Did I score today? I scored! But if you have even enough presence of mind to be able to write down your own name, today's date, the day of the week it is, it's a start. Once you have where to stand, you can take another step.
Definitely.
Once you take that next step, there's another step in front of that, or maybe there's a step to the right or a step to the left, depending on which way. And that is the thing that makes it challenging. It's like, oh, yes, you want to be wealthy. Not necessarily. Not everybody wants wealth. Money is not, when you talk about if life's a game, how do you keep score? Money's not it.
I totally agree there.
I know lots of people who are wonderfully happy, well-adjusted people that are not wealthy at all in terms of finances.
Mm.
I know plenty of financially well-off people who are miserable. It's almost like they're the anti-advertisement. It's like, you don't want to be this kind of wealthy because money doesn't buy happiness. I got a hint. Anybody who says money can't buy happiness has never paid an adoption fee at a pet shelter.
Oh, right. Okay.
Happiness on 4 little paws, or sometimes 3.
That's
But
cute.
the how, if you go to draw a line, you need an origin and a destination.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've defined those 2 down very, very tightly, there's a straight line called direction.
Yes.
And then you get to consider means, methods, modes, and models. I'm not saying it's impossible to take a rowboat to the moon. I'm saying it might not be the most practical way of going about getting there.
Yes.
There are people who've been to the moon.
Yes. Not me, but yes.
The model exists.
It does. It does. And so you talk about that in your ebook, do you?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Oh, beautiful. Excellent.
Because you see people, and some of them just seem so beyond successful. It's like, I could never be that successful. Yes, you can. And here's a hint. There are at least 100 people who've created that level of success, with certain rare extremes accepted. Most times, the success that a person wants has already been achieved by another person. And out of those 100 people who've already achieved it, at least 1 or 2 will be more than willing to offer assistance for the asking.
Absolutely. And the thing is there too is that success to one person is going to mean something totally different to another person.
Mm. And the wonderful thing about the formula is that it is so open. You define your success in terms of your origin and your desired destination.
I love that. Yep.
And then you get to learn the steps that you will take on a daily and weekly and monthly basis to get yourself from your origin toward your destination.
Perfect.
And even if you don't get exactly where you're going, along the way, there's this confidence muscle that builds.
Yes.
It's like, I planned it. I planned what I was going to do. I did what I planned. And that strengthens the spine. And you find yourself walking more upright, and in all kinds of subtle ways, you become the person that other people see and go, wow, they've got it together.
Yeah. And you surprise yourself, don't you?
I still was like, hey, Ross, you're doing good. I'm like, am I? Why? Yes, I am. Thank you. One of the things, because sometimes people say, well, I don't want to claim to be a success because that's blowing your own horn and da-da-da. A humble person does not think less of themselves. A humble person thinks of themselves less.
Oh, see there, you've done another one. That's brilliant. You have a way with words, mate.
I had to.
You did, and you've clearly done that well. Brilliant.
Yeah. So that sort of thing is what I hope will be of service to someone in today's audience. Not necessarily for me.
No, that's right, and everyone is different too. So in that, the little, have you got the daily journal there? Because I know that you showed it to me before. Have you got it to hold it up? I'm really curious.
I have got a blank copy of my page right here. And I'm going to hold it up to the camera, and you're going to lose my face maybe a little bit.
That's okay. It kind of gives us a little bit of an idea. So the time, so you got PA.
Yeah,
So
P is for planned or purposeful. A is for actual activity. And the time segments, of course, are self-explanatory. And then over here on the other side, I actually kind of put cheaters and check marks. Or, let's see, is that visible there? Can
I
you
can't
see
see
that?
at the moment.
Whoops, back up. Where am I here?
There we go. Yep.
Where it says rest, breathe, move, hydrate, fuel, and serve and earn.
Beautiful. So, because I know there's a lot of daily journals out there and things that's similar. But what I love about yours is that you have broken it down so much into little that I see them as teeny weeny steps, because I know that when I was going through my experiences, particularly maybe about 3 years ago, I found it very hard to get through the 15 minutes, through 10 minutes at a time.
Even just the majority of it, because not everything I do for myself takes 15 minutes.
Yeah, of course.
I breathe, move, and hydrate. Breathing, about a minute and a half of conscious, purposeful breathing.
Right.
Move, about a minute and a half of just marching in place with high knees. Hydrate, 8 ounces of water.
Yep. Beautiful.
Boom, boom, boom. That whole thing takes less than 5 minutes. But those are some of the most important parts of my day because of how they impact my mood and my self-care and keep me going. A lot of people, I used to be one of those folks that people, oh, he goes 0 to 60 and nothing flat. He'll get angry on you in a heartbeat. And that's not accurate. I used to go from 59 to 60 all the time because I was already at 59 all the time.
Oh, okay, right.
But that purposeful breathing, that purposeful movement, and that hydration are kind of a reset, take me down toward 40, down toward 35, down toward, and it's a practice. I don't like discipline. I really don't.
Wow.
I don't. I am undisciplined. And well, you're doing all this. How can you call yourself undisciplined? And again, it's from one of my mentors who said, put what you're afraid of behind you, put what you love in front of you, and run.
Oh, that's really good, Ross. So I know that you've created this formula. Now, I know that you're also looking to share it with others. So tell us a little bit. I know that you've got a formula that you have created. Tell us a little bit about that.
Plus one good formula.
Beautiful.
Clarity in where you are. And I built this to move aside from my feelings because I wasn't dealing well with feelings at all. I just, okay, feel what you feel and act from the facts.
Right.
So there are times when I was doing high knees, I was crying, but I was still doing the high knees because you can do high knees while you're crying. You can drink water while you're crying. It's not pretty, but you can do it. And the plus one good formula is just, it's either going to get better or it's not. Okay. Is what happened fair? No. Is what happened my fault? No, not at all. I had zero power or control over it. And it was my own personal flavor of hell that I could not do anything but stand there and watch things happen.
Wow.
But if I want to heal and grow to where I'm not continually, metaphorically bleeding on everybody around me, it's my responsibility to do the work incrementally, plus one good at a time, to make my life better.
Beautiful. So it's +1 for helping yourself.
Well, and what's really cool, think, if you will, of any sort of progress you care to make.
Mm-hmm.
You know, from the philosopher's phrase of the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step,
Mm-hmm.
+1. If you feel like you're stuck in ice and you've been from 0 to 31 degrees multiple times, from 31, it's +1 good to change state from solid to liquid.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people aren't necessarily that bad off. You know, they're doing well, but they feel like they could be doing so much better.
Absolutely.
They're almost at 211 degrees water trying to get steam power going. +1 good.
Beautiful. So it doesn't matter. So it's not like you necessarily have to be where, unfortunately, you were, and to the point where you kind of had to,
No.
Force yourself to take the +1 step. You can start from anywhere.
Exactly, because funny thing about stairs, whether you're in the basement or whether you're just one floor below the top, one step up, +1 good.
Love it. Love it.
And if you happen to be one of those alpha types who, oh, it wasn't perfect the first time. Maybe not.
Doesn't matter.
+1 good. Because that voice is, whether it wasn't perfect or I'm a complete failure.
Yeah.
I have documentation that those voices in my head are full of it.
Absolutely. And what you've done is, it's like I kind of equate it to a really fancy to-do list. It's a fancy diary. It's a fancy journal.
Among other things, consider this in another light. If your life is a game, who's writing your rules?
Oh.
Are you winning? How are you keeping score?
Yes.
My life is a game, and there is no evidence to prove that life is meant to be taken seriously.
Absolutely.
None at all. There's no evidence for that. We're all going the same way anyway. And we're all just, who was it, Ram Dass, who said we're all just walking each other home.
Yeah.
And so my thing was, I had seen journals, and I had seen planners, and I had seen systems, and some of those teachers are really great. Tony Robbins, Brendan Burchard, James Clear in Atomic Habits. But those guys are teaching at a master level. Okay?
Yep.
They did their versions of this when they were starting out.
Absolutely.
And they improved it and refined it, and you wouldn't recognize what they started with from where they are now.
No, that's right. And everyone has to start somewhere, don't they? So great.
Yep. Now, if you are just starting, liken it to an educational system. If you're in first grade, or even if you're in junior high school and you're just starting to take physics, would you rather get tutored by a kid who took physics last year? Or would you rather get tutored by the college professor who just won a Nobel Peace Prize in physics?
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Because he's probably not going to be able to bring it down to the simple, clear place where you can see where you can apply it to your own situation or life.
Yes, I totally agree with that, because while, as you say, the Tony Robbins and the Brendan Burchards do a great job out there, and I follow them as well, but they can be quite intimidating when you look at their success, can't they?
Yeah, the teachers who teach from their successes are excellent.
Yes.
I have a teacher who teaches from his failures.
Love us. Tell us more. I'm really love to hear what you say here.
And okay, Stephen Barnes is my absolute hero. I would have him adopt me if I weren't too old. But he has, despite his, and I'll put him right up there with Tony and Brendan, but he has recognized that it's time to come back to the basics, back to the fundamentals. Somebody told me, first rule of holes, man, if you're in one, stop digging. And I said, wait a minute, how else can I check my foundation?
Coming out with some corkers, aren't you?
2x4. And somebody in your audience needs to hear this.
Absolutely. And I find, it doesn't matter who comes on, who talks, everyone, there's someone out there, you're right, who does need to hear this, and they're going to press play and then go, wow, this is exactly what I needed to hear today. So I was reading some things that you sent me. Now, I love that you've said you take people from the origin clarity to the destination clarity. Share about that, because I think this is really, really good.
If one can step back enough to look at, define, and describe where they are, that observer perspective puts distance where the emotional content is still there, is still valid. We're not invalidating anything, but it is no longer so overpowering. We can look at where we are, again, deal with the feels, but we're acting from facts.
Mm-hmm.
My facts were I was carrying 80 pounds that my body didn't need. My fact, it took some real effort not to jump in judgmentally about, they're overweight and fat and they're blah, blah, lazy and blah, No, just the facts about where you are now. Not where you were yesterday, not where you were last month, not where you were when it was terrible, when the terrible thing happened, because I'm not the only one something terrible has ever happened to. And there, comparison is the thief of joy. I'm not going to, there are people who had it worse, there are people who had the waste of energy.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
To compare.
Yeah.
So identify, describe, and define where you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
Write it down. Get it out of your head, get it onto the paper. Write it down. Then you're free to figure where you want to be, how you want to be.
Beautiful.
If I ask how you are you?
I'm great. I am good.
You're thinking I'm asking about your condition, which is fair. That's usually the question.
Mm-hmm.
What if I'm asking about your method? How are you so cheerful? How are you so bright? How are you so enthusiastic? This method. Can you describe it? Can you describe how you got to where you are, how you are?
It's making me think, but probably not right now. See, that, like you say, it takes a lot of thought, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of thought.
And so those are things that go into, and I go into them deeper in the book, in the ebook, about destination. Goals are fine for soccer and hockey players. Plans are fine for architects. I like a word with destiny built right into it.
Yep.
Planned destination.
Yes, I love it. And I do agree with what you say about write it down too, because when there's, I don't know what it is, but with me as well, there is something in the power of putting things onto paper. And obviously with your system that you've got going, it's something that you can look back on and you can see the measure of success that you've had. But I also see that, like you said before, was you need to choose to look at what you didn't manage to achieve, not as a failure, but as maybe something else to strive towards next time.
Room for growth.
Room for growth. That's right. Exactly.
And the funny thing about humans and what we want, our desires sometimes change.
True. Yes.
The things that we did to get to what we thought we wanted years ago probably aren't going to serve us when we want something different now.
Exactly.
Some of them are universal, some are just not.
I agree. I totally agree with you there. Yeah. And often we, we'll get to a certain step and then we'll kind of, like you say, we'll look back and it'll be like, oh no, okay, that's not quite, where I am now. My vision of my destiny has changed a little bit. So let's alter it, which is great.
Yep. The only person that we have to satisfy is the one in the mirror.
Love it. Yep.
Are we what we want? And there's a exercise in the ebook about actually going from listing out the top 20 things we value or we feel important. And we go into opinions and calcified beliefs and all kinds of stuff. But we question where they come from later. First thing we do is this is what I believe. I think I believe. This is what I think is important. This is what, and then we do another list and we compare them. Which is more important? Which is more important? Which is more, until eventually you have a top 1 through 20 of this is me.
Beautiful. I love that. Now, you've mentioned the ebook a couple of times. Maybe tell us a little bit more about that.
The Plus One Good formula is a very brief primer, very brief but very thorough. I made it as dense as I possibly could to respect the time of the reader and say, these are some of the major pieces I built it from. This is what it's intended to do. This is what it's not intended to do. I'm not here to tell anybody what they should do. I'm not going to should on anybody. But to suggest that you can do what you want to do within certain biological limitations. I can't be pregnant, sorry. But that it is a basic belief in the human ability. Once you get clear what you actually want, then all you have to do is decide, do I want it enough to give it what it needs to happen?
Beautiful. I love that. So if people would like to get a hold of your ebook, is there a way that they might be able to do that, Ross?
Ordinarily, I have priced that ebook at $19.95 US, but I don't have my website up yet.
That's okay.
This is inconvenient. So, in order to help ease the grief over the inconvenience, I have discounted the price of the ebook to $10 US. And people can contact me. My name is Ross, ROSS, at +onegood.com. I built the email part of the website because that's easy.
Beautiful, Ross. Look, that is fine. And as usual, we will put that email address, and I'll put the +1 ebook down below in the description of this podcast. So if people would like to get a copy of that, and I think that's an absolute bargain that you have reduced the price so much. So thank you for that. And yeah, we will make sure that all your details are people can get in contact with should they need to.
Thank you very much. Yeah. When I constructed it and when I priced it, I wanted to make sure that just about everybody could reach it, because I know that when I was where I really needed it, that was pretty much about what I could afford. And I wanted to make sure that the people that really need it can reach it. So, yeah.
And that's very important too. And you know, as we've had this discussion today, Ross, something has just been sticking in the back of my mind is that you know, we're talking about the difference between existing versus living, and you have clearly gone through that journey yourself. I am sorry to hear about your angel, your wife, but what you have done with your life in the 10 years since she's gone is incredible. You know, I can feel the passion that you've got behind what you do, and I'm just so impressed with the way you've you know, turned that situation around for yourself, and you are now living. I would say, I might be putting words in your mouth here, but a life that, in general, that you want to live.
+1 good at a time.
+1.
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Well, Ross, thank you so much for coming on today, and thank you for being the first male guest on the show. So that is very exciting. I love that, Faith. There we go. Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you again in the next episode. Bye.
Thank you.